Hello friends, this is Worm, and it's Wednesday, but we are going to do another episode of Exotic Recrafting because I missed last week's episode. For those of y'all who have not seen this series is a series where we talk about weak, underused, or straight up bad exotics of Destiny 2, and talk about how we could potentially make them better by giving them buffs, changing stuff like that. And on the menu for today, we have Vigilance Wing. But before we talk about Vigilance Wing, I want to remind y'all I will be live Tuesday and Thursday nights, starting at 9 p.m. Central. So come over here to YouTube and just chime in. We have a lot of fun playing Destiny and talking about stuff. But yeah, let's talk about Vigilance Wing, because Vigilance Wing is a D1 class, or I'm sorry, a D2 classic. Like, it came with the vanilla game, and there was a time period when this thing was an absolute monster way back in the day. Like, I don't know how many of y'all have played that far back, but Vigilance Wing was a very, very good weapon. However, with time, with changes and buffs to other weapons and just general changes to the game, it has seen some drop off. And I wouldn't say this weapon is necessarily bad. It's a very unique weapon, which we'll talk about in just a second. And it definitely can hold its own inside of PvP, but in PvE, it's really not that good, and I think it is because this is more of like a PvP weapon. But I've got some changes on the menu to talk about how we can make it better inside PvE. But first, let's talk about what this weapon actually does, starting off with its perks here. First perk here is Harsh Truths. This weapon fires a 5-round burst. That's what I was talking about whenever I mentioned this weapon is unique. It's the only weapon that fires in a 5-round burst, or the only pulse rifle that fires in a 5-round burst. It also states that when a nearby ally is killed, you gain health regeneration and increased movement speed. It also comes with a unique perk, Last Stand, improved weapon performance, and greatly increased recovery when its wielder is the last living member of a fire team. And then finally, it does have a catalyst. The catalyst just gives it the perk Ensemble, which grants it some handling and reload benefits when allies are nearby. Let's talk about what this weapon wants you to do, like how this weapon wants you to play, because this weapon is a difficult one to change because of the playstyle that surrounds it. And the playstyle that surrounds it is basically you have to rely on your teammates dying. And I don't ever think this is really a great gameplay idea. Like, yes, it can be nice in some situations, like we talked about in PvP, where you have teammates dying all the time, but in PvE content, and even in higher skill content, like maybe trials and stuff, your teammates dying is not a good thing. And so this is kind of like an emergency, like, oh no, my teammate just died, so now, like, I need this thing to kick in and, you know, have that greatly improved performance, give me that health regeneration, that movement speed bonus, and that increased recovery, all of that stuff. So it's kind of coming in as like almost a last resort style of weapon. And I figured we could talk about how we could potentially change that. I want to break it down into basically just a couple different categories, starting off with just stat bumps that I think would benefit the weapon. Then I want to talk about some perk substitutions, some intrinsic perk changes, some unique perk changes, and finally talk about some full rework ideas. But let's first of all talk about some stat bumps. Really, Vigilance Wing's stats across the board are pretty decent. Like, they're not too bad. I would say the one change I would like to see to the stats on this weapon is just increasing the recoil direction all the way up to 100. This is such a unique pulse rifle with a 5-round burst. The 79 recoil direction that it currently has is not unmanageable by any means, but I think just bumping it up to 100 would make it feel a lot smoother, and especially because it has that 5-round burst. You know, it's not going to necessarily make your bullets hit in a perfect spot, but it will kind of line up that verticality, which would really help the weapon a lot. But outside of that, I don't think the weapon needs any other stat changes. Its range of 65, its stability of 70, pretty decent all around the board. So with that being said, just increasing the recoil direction. Now I want to talk about some catalyst perk substitutions. And this is really where this weapon kind of let me down. I don't have the catalyst currently unlocked because I don't want to go into PvP and use this, because it's, again, not a weapon that I enjoy using. But currently the catalyst just gives it Ensemble. I think that while this perk really kind of makes the identity of the weapon, it kind of helps with the identity of the weapon, I don't necessarily like this perk, and I think that it should just have some more lethality perks. Obviously, lethality perks coming to mind: kinetic tremors right off the bat. This is a kinetic weapon. I think kinetic tremors would make this more powerful. You could leave Ensemble on and add kinetic tremors on top of it would be great. I also think Firefly would be just a really solid perk. Again, giving it that increase to its lethality inside of PvE activities And of course, the final perk here is Rapid Hit. Rapid Hit is great on any pulse rifle, and especially if Vigilance Wing could get Rapid Hit on it, it could actually fill up that Rapid Hit meter in just one burst, which would be really neat. But again, mix and match these. I like the idea of Ensemble being on the weapon, because Ensemble kind of flows with the way the weapon functions in its current state. But I think that you could increase a little bit more lethality by adding one or even multiple of these perks to the Catalyst just to make it better. But now let's talk about some buffs to the intrinsic perk, Harsh Truths. Now currently, of course, it fires 5-round burst. That's kind of its exotic uniqueness, but it also, when you have a nearby ally killed in battle, it will give you those stat boosts, that health regeneration as well as that movement speed. Now, I would first of all change it so that an ally no longer has to be close by to activate. And granted, the radius at which an ally can be killed and still give you the effect is pretty sizable. Like it's pretty big. I think it's like 15 or 20 meters, something like that. So it's not like they have to be right next to you. But at the same time, let's just change it so there doesn't have to be a limit. If your teammate in a strike dies, even if they're, 200 meters away, it will grant you that Harsh Truths buff. I think that would just instantly add to the weapon. That way you don't have to rely on being so close to your allies. Because again, running around having to be next to your allies kind of get annoying in Destiny. That's one of the reasons why not a lot of people run full support. But with that change, I also think that instead of just granting a generic health regeneration, maybe this weapon should grant Devour or Restoration ×2. And I know that this is a little bit kind of wishy-washy, because again, this is a kinetic weapon, but we've seen some kinetic weapons have synergy with some of our other, our elemental stuff. Rat King grants Void Invisibility and synergize with Void. Lumina does synergize with Ember of Benevolence. So I don't see it being out of the realm of possible for Bungie to give us either Devour or Restoration instead of just that generic health regeneration. I think that would be a pretty decent change, pretty self-explanatory. Keep the movement speed buff. I would even go as far as say, instead of just getting a movement speed buff, give the user Amplified. Again, and I know this is playing with a lot of different elemental buffs. We threw Devour out there, we threw Restoration. Now we're throwing Amplified into the mix. But again, like, as you're losing teammates is a bad thing in Destiny 2. Like, you don't want your teammates to be dying. So if your teammates are dying, there needs to be some kind of offset. And I think that giving Devour, Restoration, or Amplified, Devour or Restoration and Amplified would really help solidify this weapon as being, okay, something that is more desirable to use. Now, in terms of the unique perk, which is Last Stand, I have several ideas for this one. And again, in my head, the way that they're kind of playing out, I'm not exactly sure on numbers and stuff. So these numbers could be subject to your own opinion. In fact, when I talk about these numbers, please tell me in the comments what your opinion on these numbers would be. But for starters, with Last Stand, first thing I would do was improve weapon performance and recovery based on the number of teammates that are down instead of being solely the last member alive. Again, as you're losing teammates, that's not a good thing, but at the same time, your teammates are also reviving each other. You're currently working on reviving teammates, and being the last person alive is really uncommon. Outside of situations maybe like Trials of Osiris, I don't see myself being the last member of the fire team. So instead of working based on being the last member of the fire team alive, it now works based on the number of teammates that are down. So if you are in a 3-man activity, you and 2 teammates, and one of your teammates dies, you get, say, 50% of the standard buff. Okay, instead of the 100%, you get 50%. And then if your other teammate dies, then you get the full effects of Last Stand. Now, I also think that we could go a little bit further with Last Stand here, and in PvE only, increase the weapon damage based on whether or not you were the last player alive. And I want to really nail this in here. This is, first of all, PvE only, and the weapon damage bonus that you get is based on if you were the last person alive or not. Unlike, the previous recommendation where we had it based on the number of teammates that are down. If you are the last living member of your fire team, you get a weapon damage bonus. And I would say 400% is a pretty reasonable number. Again, if you've got 2 teammates down, you're the last alive, you're going to need all the help that you can get. So giving it a 400% damage increase, really a nice benefit. Also, have it just refill the magazine every kill you get while you're the last member of your fire team. And something that I want to really hit home here it's not just being the only fire team, it is the only living fire team. So you can't load into an activity solo. You wouldn't be able to take, Vigilance Wing into, say, a Lost Sector, a solo Lost Sector, or into a solo Nightfall and just have a 400% damage boost. Like, you have to have teammates, and those teammates have to be dead to get this damage boost. But at the same time, if all your teammates are dead, you're now getting a 400% damage increase inside PvE only. I also think that you could go a little bit further and in PvE only get a damage bonus based on the number of dead teammates. But again, you have to, it's substantially lower than that 400%. Like, let's say, you have a teammate who dies in battle and you still have one teammate that's up. Maybe it's just like a 25% damage boost, which is still a lot, don't get me wrong, but for a primary ammo weapon, that's not like anything insanely crazy, and you just have that buff until another teammate dies, and then say a 3-man activity, that other teammate dies, then it jumps to that 400%. Or if you're in, say, maybe like a Dares of Eternity, something like that, like as you are losing teammates, if you have like 3 people dead, it's up to like, maybe 40% or something like that. I think that would be a really nice change. Again, that's in PvE only. So the damage increases that we get from my suggestions to Last Stand are for PvE only. But that's it for the intrinsic and the unique perk changes and buffs. Now I want to talk about some full rework ideas for this weapon. And this is one that I was really excited to think about and come up with. But basically, the idea I had behind this weapon is let this be the revive weapon of the game. So what I had is introduce to Vigilance Wing a meter mechanic. So we see some meter mechanics on other weapons. Barrow Dyad most recently has a meter where as you're dealing damage, it fills up. But unlike Barrow Dyad and some of these other ones, it fills up with maybe 50 points. I haven't really, again, the numbers here I think is something that I'm not really exactly the best at, but it fills up once you get to 50 points. You get 1 point for killing miners, 3 points for killing majors, 7 points for killing champions or guardians, and 10 points for killing bosses and mini bosses. Now, once that meter is completely filled up, the weapon can be used for one of the following purposes. Number one, it will allow the weapon, to revive an ally without consuming a token. So if you're in a Grandmaster Nightfall, or you're in a raid scenario, or a day 1 dungeon or something like that, once you have that 50-point bar fill up, you can revive an ally without using a token. So it's just a free revive basically. Or you could use the weapon to revive allies when no revive tokens remain. So if you're the last living member of your fire team, you're out of a token, you can fill this bar up by getting kills on these different varieties of enemies, and then use the weapon to revive somebody without actually having to have a token. Or the final one, and this is the one I'm kind of wishy-washy about, you could also keep the weapon with the ability to revive your own self. So when you go down and that bar is full, it will just instantly pop you back up from the grave, like you are back from the grave. That would be the three things you could do with that meter mechanic. I also think that you could add in a nice little benefit, in terms of a full rework, by just allowing the weapon to revive somebody from a distance. So instead of having to run up to their body and revive them, you could be maybe like 50 meters away, and you just look at their ghost, and you can revive them from 50 meters away, or something like that. But really, the core idea behind the rework that I have is the ability to use this weapon to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do in Destiny, but it does have a pretty steep cost to do so. Or maybe not a steep cost, but it does require a high threshold to achieve this. Again, it needs to be high. 50 points is just the number I gave. Maybe it'd be 100 points, maybe it'd be 150 points, something like that. It wants you to stay alive, be getting kills with the weapon, you're filling up that bar, and then once that bar is full, you can use the weapon to do something that you wouldn't normally be able to do. And of course, in PvP, I don't think this would be broken because, getting 7 points for PvP, that's a lot of kills you have to get before you can just revive an ally or revive a teammate. Trials of Osiris, it would become a non-factor because you couldn't even realistically get enough points to fill up that bar. In 6s, you could maybe, 12, 13, or 14 or 15 kills. I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but if you get 15 kills in a row, then you can revive an ally or you can revive yourself I don't think that it would be anything crazy busted inside PvP, so long as that meter is kept very high and the Guardian points are kept really low. But those are all my ideas for changes for Vigilance Wing. I want Vigilance Wing to be a good weapon. It has some killer exotic ornaments that I absolutely love. Vigilance Saint 14, which is what you're watching in the background here, is a great ornament, but it needs to see some change before we use it. And these suggestions I think would be some of the most fun, most interesting, and unique ways you could possibly change the weapon. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you feel about my ideas and my suggestions? How do you feel about the rework, allowing you to maybe self-res or revive people without a token? Just tell me all that stuff in the comments. Of course, if you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor, drop a like, helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, conversations, debates, discussions, all that good stuff. And do me one more favor, watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you'll like them. Guys, I'll see y'all next time. Bye for now.